Hello, everybody. I think I am live. If anyone is out there, if you can let me know that you're seeing me okay. Oh, perfect. Thanks, Crystal. Thanks for joining. And I see that there should be somebody else here, but I don't know who. So I think I've got my lighting, I'm hoping, a little bit better this week. Unfortunately, I am using the same camera because my son was going to come over and help me hook my better camera up to the computer, but was not possible. He just wasn't able to come over this week. So hopefully by next time. So I want to start out again, as usual, just have a quick little, am I upside down? No, I'm not. Okay, have a quick little go through our supplies that we're going to be using for today. And this is what I use for almost every sketch I would ever do. So just a plain pencil is fine. I usually use an HB. This is my HB in here somewhere. And I tend to use these clutch pencils, these mechanical pencils. Oh, hello, Clarice. Thank you for joining. I'm so glad to see you. So yeah, I'm just using, it's just a plain HB pencil, though it's in this mechanical kind of a holder. I like it just because I can get it so sharp, and the weight always stays the same. But I've got other pencils in here, and I've got a 4B if I want to go really dark, and I've got a 4H if I want to go light. Just a little kneaded eraser is what I use usually. Sometimes I will use one of these. One of these Tombow. If I really need to take out some lines, I usually would clean my Tombow just on an emery board. And what else? I use my brush and some other little tools to maybe sometimes give a little bit of a smudging effect. So I've got some little what are these called? Stumps, paper stumps in here, and Q-tips or anything like that that you have will work. So I think, and I also have a brush to brush away any crumbs or anything. And I just wanted today to go over the sketchbook that I use. So I use Peter Popper sketchbook. It's just a 5x8 about. And I just take the label off the front and I put it on the inside so that I always know, because all these 5x8 black sketchbooks, they all look the same pretty much. So, but the paper inside is different. So I really do like this one, especially because the paper is perforated. So if you want, you can always take the paper out. So I'm just going to quickly go through the sketches I've done over the last 2 weeks. So since our last Sketchy Saturday, that's what we did last time. And these are the sketches then that I have done through the week, for 2 weeks. Most of them are very, very fast, hardly more than a little scribble or a gesture, just to get my hand moving during the daytime. Many of these I didn't even bother to put the time down. So that was kind of an interesting one to do, the camel. And then I used to do a lot of landscape sketches last year, and I was kind of missing doing those. So I decided to do a couple more, and some more the other day, yesterday and the day before. So that brings us to today. And I'm just going to clip this open. And this time around, I was smart enough to print out my reference so that the glare from my tablet doesn't bother me. This is what we're going to be doing today, this little bunny. So I thought that would be kind of appropriate for the season. So I'm just going to put him up somewhere where I can see him. Okay. And I think we're ready. So I hope everybody is ready and we will get started. So I'm gonna use most of the page for this sketch. Usually I only use a half a page, but on these Sketchy Saturdays I go into a little bit more detail than I would normally do when I'm just sketching for myself, just so that I can try and help you guys figure out how you want to do these, to get the shape and the form. So basically I'm looking at my reference photo, and the way I usually will start a sketch is if it's an animal or a body of a human, not just the head, but a body, I usually measure using the head as a reference. So I will, and it's very, it's not exact. I don't use a ruler. I just use my pencil and I use proportions. So I want to see approximately how long his head is. I've got my my pencil up against my reference photo here to see how long from the tip of his nose to the back of his head. And then I will translate that onto as a shape. I'm just going to do a little bit of a, actually I'm going to do him smaller because I want to leave some room at the top. So I'm going to do his head is kind of a little bit of a triangular shape. So I'm just going to do a little bit of a triangle. And this shape then, this size, is what I'm going to judge everything else by. I'm going to judge his ear size, his body size, his leg size. Everything is going to be judged against that head length. I'm just going to move that out of my way. Put my reference here. So looking again at the reference, I've got his ears are about half the length of his head. So I'm only going to bring it, so they're not super big, not super long ears. And they come out right at the back of his head and then beside his head, beside the other one. Actually, this ear is a little bit more shaped. We're just getting in very basic shapes right now. We're going to come back and refine all of this. So then his body, again, if I take my pencil and I measure from the tip of his nose to the back of his head, and then I take that measurement down his body is about twice the length of his head. So just a little bit longer maybe than twice the length. So I've got him up quite high. Maybe I'll move him down. So because I do want to, I didn't think I'd have enough room. I thought he was bigger than that. So I'll just start his head down here a little bit. That triangle shape. His ears are coming out like so. And then his body, there's going to be one length of the head, two lengths of the head. So I've just put little markers in there to see where, and his body comes down from the back of the ears, fairly straight. There's a little bump right where his shoulder blade would be. So it comes down straight and then it comes out just a little bit. And that's where the withers or the shoulder blades are. And then it comes out in a very slight angle down to where his tail comes out at the bottom like that. Now, as far as the width of the body, I want to measure that also against the length of the head. So if I put my pencil back to the length of the head, measuring that, it's almost exactly the same length, same width as his body. Obviously, though, he's got a neck, and I think, despite my measurements, I think he's too short. I need his body considerably longer. Not sure why that measurement is not working out, but he looks a lot better if he's longer. So again, if your measurements, sometimes I'm going too fast and I'm not being accurate with my measurement. I think that's what's happened here. So if your measurements are not working out and he looks like his head is way too big for his body or his body's way too big for his head, despite your measurements, either remeasure to make sure that that your measurements are accurate, or you can eyeball it if you're confident enough to say, yeah, his body's way too short for his head, then you can just eyeball it. So his neck is coming out. His head is too long. That's my problem. His head is too long. Okay, again, I'm just scribbling, noticing, comparing as I go along. And as I notice these things, I can adjust them because it's just a sketch. His neck is coming out. It's because of the tilt of his head. His jaw is actually here and his neck is coming out here. And not very long down before it starts to come into his little chest where he's got a lot of fur. And then his legs, his front legs, looking again at the reference photo, his elbow of his front leg is almost exactly just a little bit further back than his jaw. So if you're looking at the reference, his jaw isn't very well defined, but you can see there's a little shape of the jaw there, and his elbow is right around that same area. And his leg comes out straight, and then it comes down. Actually, it comes down forward a little bit for his little paw, and his paw is not very long. And then it comes back into his chest. And his chest is between his two front legs, so the other leg comes out. I think maybe his leg should be just slightly longer. And then this one comes out parallel to it and partially hidden by the other one that's out in front of it. Does that make sense to everybody? And I hope I'm not going too fast. If I'm going too fast, let me know and I'll slow down. And I think actually his legs are not wide enough, not thick enough. So I'll give him a little bit more bone there. And I'm going to go back in here and just erase that. There, that's much better. Okay. Then his belly, make sure again that you always want your belly, the line of the belly always has to meet up with the line of the chest. Okay, so make sure that like your belly's not back here or out here. It has to line up with that. Otherwise it will look a little strange. And his belly comes down. There's not much because of the fur that's covering it. There's no muscle showing there, anything like that. And it comes down almost exactly in the same parallel line as his back. You can see in the reference photo, if you're looking for where the muscles are, you can see the shadow of the showing you where the muscle, there's a muscle underneath where that you can see that the fur actually comes over and then dips in there because that's where the muscle is. So that when we get into refining the picture, that's what we're going to be looking at. So the belly comes down, and then you can't really see, if you didn't know how a rabbit was made, it almost looks like that belly continues right down, and you can actually draw it right down here, right down to the bottom where he's sitting, but actually that's his leg. His rear leg comes in like this. It's just hidden because of all the fur. It's hard to see it. Okay. And then his little foot comes out at the same level. Oh, no wonder I'm having a problem seeing. I've got my glasses on. I was wondering, everything's looking blurry on my page. Okay, so his foot comes out, not too long. So if you actually compare where his foot comes out to his other feet, to his front feet, he's got them kind of tucked in under him so they don't come out quite as far. And then the other back foot is more like that. Okay. So that should give you your basic shape. You should have a bit, and then probably it would be helpful to just put in a little bit of ground underneath him so that he doesn't just look like he's floating in midair. I can put some grass in there after. And I'm just going to erase this. So you should end up with something that is well proportioned by this time. You know, it looks, you're not looking at it and thinking, okay, that's not well proportioned. It should look reasonably the proportions that a rabbit would have. If it looks like his body is too long, too fat, too small, then you might want to adjust that. Same here, his muzzle is a little bit too wide, so I will be adjusting that. So, but you're starting out with your basic shape here. I'm just checking his tail here, comes back here, like so. Yeah, I think we've got the basic shape in now. So now, once you've got that basic shape in, we're going to start to refine those shapes. So coming back to the head, his nose comes down into quite a little point, and it comes up very triangular up to a bump where his brow bone is, his eye, and then it goes straight. Okay, so we started off with a really rough shape, and then when we go back over it the second time, we're refining it. And if you're finding your lines that you previously drew in, if they're distracting, just go in and erase them. Okay. And then you want to make a note of where his eye is. So his eye, I always start with a round shape, even though it's not completely round. And I always start a little bit bigger than what it should be. And if you'll find if you draw a circle round and round and round and round and round, you will eventually get to a point where you are making a round shape. That's not a very good explanation. If you try and draw a circle really carefully, you're not going to get it round. If you just start putting your hand in a circular motion, you will end up pretty round by the time you're done. You fall into a rhythm, and it turns out pretty round. So this eye is quite a bit too big, but that's okay. I'm not going to worry about that. I just want to get the placement in. And then his little nose, see his head is very, very slightly turned towards the camera. Very slightly, because if it wasn't turned towards the camera, the tip of his nose would be up here, but it's not. It's in here because he's tipped towards the camera. Okay, so you can just kind of scribble in where his nose is. We can't really see his mouth, so we won't worry about that. Then his ears, my ears are too upright. His ears actually come back almost on a 45-degree angle. And they're very rounded, so they're not quite as long as his head. So I have to keep that in mind. They're very rounded up here at the tip, and then they come down a little bit pointy at the very back. Something like that. And then that other one behind is a little bit taller in the back and comes down like that. And there we've got the shape of his head in. And then his neck, again, same as your chest meets up with your belly. Depending on the animal, it's not always the case, but generally speaking, the top of the head is going to have to meet up with the top of the neck. Like it's all one piece. So you want to make sure, I originally had his neck down here, his head up here. I want to make sure those lines meet up. Okay, if I was to draw right through the ear, they should actually meet up. Okay, and then we're going to put the fur in later. So his neck is maybe a little bit long. His withers should be up here. So you're constantly, so again, as I kind of explained a little bit last Saturday, the shoulder blade on most animals it's here, and it's in a 40. It's hard to judge where this would be. It's coming back here like this, the way he's sitting, I think. It's generally on a 45-degree angle for a lot of animals, not all. So, and that's where the shoulders are pushing up. That's how it goes right there, like that. I mean, you can't really, well, you can kind of see how the fur is falling right here and right here. That's giving a little bit of an indication here where those withers are, the shadow. So that's basically, you don't have to draw that in, but if that, the withers will start where the point of that shoulder is. And then they dip back in a little bit and come down pretty straight to the back. Okay, then, okay, I think that's really it as far as the shape goes. So I'm going to just come in here and try and get rid of some of these lines that I don't want. So you might want to, if you are caught up, just clean up some of the lines in your sketch that were not meant to be there. I'll just do that and let you guys catch up. Okay. So then once you've got your basic shape there, then we can come in and start to really refine it. Okay. And again, please do remember, this is not a refined drawing. It's only a sketch. We're trying to, the whole purpose of a sketch, especially, well, for me this year, the reason I started drawing animals, I wanted to try and, start to become more familiar with animal anatomy. So it's a learning process, So if it doesn't end up looking as perfect as you would like it to look, it is just a sketch. It's a learning process, so don't worry too much about it. So I'm just putting the inside here of his ear, and that inside of his ear is quite dark, so I'm just using the side of my pencil, and this is just an HB pencil, and I'm just very lightly scribbling in that shadow. And it gets lighter towards the outer edge of the ear, so I'm just lifting some of the pressure off. It's such a tiny little sketch that it's hard to actually see. And then his eye. So his eye is way too big, way too round, so we'll fix that. And I'm going to just fix, let's see, take my eraser and get rid of some of this. There we go. It's better. Okay, there we are. Actually, so his eye is too high. So I'm looking now at the top of where his brow is, the brow bone, and how far down to his eye that is, and his eye is just a little bit too high. So I'm going to just make sure that I indicate by a darker line that it's down further. And although the eyeball itself is round, the shape of the eye is kind of almond shaped. So you can add kind of like these little wings on each side of the eye at the front and the back. And then just so you end up with something like that. Now the highlight in this guy's eye is right up at the top. So, oops, sorry, she here. Joy. So I'm going to just fill in the bottom here. And that gives him the highlight up at the top. And again, it's not perfect, but that's okay. Okay, then his little nose is there on the side. And he's got a lot of shading, a lot of shadow down in here. So we can start to add, I'm going to just take some of this out because it's affecting the look of his. There we go, that's a bit better. So underneath, he's got all this darker shading, which helps to, even though you cannot see his mouth there, that darker shading helps to indicate that that is where his mouth is. So I'm just going to shade all the way down his neck, really. And I'm just using the side of my pencil back and forth, very light pressure in a scribbly stroke down to underneath his jaw. Just kind of outline his jaw with that shading. Okay. And he's got whiskers here. So you can just very subtly just dot in some little dots to give an idea of that. And he's also got this little kind of a darker line. It's almost like a little eyebrow right above his eye. So I'm just going to very lightly shade that in. And right there, that just those few little things starts to give his face some personality. So right along the lower edge of his jaw, he's got a lot of longer fur. So I'm just going to kind of indicate that with these little lines, and right along this line. So right along here, he's got this longer fur. And then right along here, he's got a little bit shorter fur. So I want to make sure that I kind of indicate that. And I'm just going to come in. Very, very light pressure on my pencil just to shade that in a little bit. And then he's got some long hair around his ears, which is kind of sticking out. And that longer hair is around his eyes. So I'm just pulling my pencil very, very light strokes, but longer strokes to give an indication that he's got some longer fur there. And then coming down his neck here, that's all in shadow. And you can make it kind of fuzzy, kind of scribbly, just kind of scribbly to indicate that he's pretty fuzzy down there. He's got a lot of fur all here. And you can see some right above his where his leg is. That chest fur is longer and it kind of covers up his leg a little bit. And then that back leg, am I going too fast? Please do say if I am, and I will slow down. I'm hoping that you guys are able to keep up. So this back leg, it's in behind the front one. So obviously it's going to be more in shadow. So I'm just going to shade that back leg in, just light pressure. And then the paw, my paw is a little bit too far forward. So I'm just going to bring it in a little bit. And it's just going to be a little bit darker than the front one. And then the front one comes in. And right underneath his paw is where it's darkest, because his body is blocking the light. And then his knee, again, just like with the deer last time, always you've got a little tiny bit of a protrusion, a little bit of a rounding there, and the shadow underneath where his knee is, or his wrist, I guess, in this case. And then some of this shading is here. I think his leg is too long, even though his elbow in the reference comes back behind his jaw. It looks too long on my drawing, so I'm just going to shorten it a bit. And that's too short. There we go, right in between maybe. And his leg is a little bit furry. So again, I'm just scribbling a little bit just to indicate that it's not really a smooth line. Okay. And then all along his neck here, he's got quite long fur. So I'm just, again, scribbling this outline. It's just it's literally just a scribble, the side of my pencil. And anywhere that I'm seeing dark parts, the shading, the shadow, that's what I'm translating now with my pencil, is I'm looking for those little dips in the fur. And that's what I'm using my pencil to indicate. So there is a little bit of a kind of a rounding here where the fur kind of dips, and there's lots of little shadings in here. There's lots of shading around underneath his foreleg and down into his belly, because obviously the light is coming from, well, the light looks like it's coming from the upper right. So everything on the lower left especially is going to be in shadow. Okay. And his belly is it's got the longest fur, really. Well, not maybe the longest, but it's very fuzzy. So you can really indicate that. But it's got the white. His belly is white versus his body is sort of a tan color. So you can indicate that by not shading in too much closer down to the belly. And he's also got this his what do you call it? His thigh is white as well. I think it needs to be a little bit higher here. So I'm just looking now, basically, where are the darkest parts in the fur, and that's really all I'm drawing in. And then I want to so the back of his neck is very fuzzy, his withers quite fuzzy, and then as he comes back into his back, the fur gets much longer and silkier back here, so it's not sticking out quite so much. So I'm not gonna make him quite as fuzzy back there. And then his little foot down here is in shadow from his body, right there. And so I'm just indicating some of the fur here. His body is brown, his tail is white, so I'm not going to shade his tail in too much. And then his other foot is almost completely in shadow. So I'm just indicating shadow by the pressure of my pencil. Where it's darker, I just press a little bit harder. Where it's lighter, I just press a little bit lighter. So, and this is, again, it's an HB pencil. If you were using a 4H pencil, then your lines, let me see if I can grab it, your shading would not be nearly as dark. So you can always do that too. You can always change. And if I was drawing this versus just doing a sketch, which I usually just use one pencil for, but if this was a drawing where I wanted to get the actual fur in, I would change pencil. And I don't know if it'll pick it up, but this is a very, very different kind of effect with the 4H versus the HB. Same pressure. And you can see that the 4H is finer. It fills the tooth of the paper in more, whereas this leaves more white. So you can always change your pencil if you want, so that you're not, if you want to fill in where the lighter areas are with a lighter, or you can also use your smudging tools for that as well. So I'm just gonna. But I'll continue to use this HB since I started with it. Okay. Then I think we're going to we want to make sure that his body has some shadow, some shading under him. So if you're looking at the reference, you can see that in front of his body, the grass is in shadow, and that's because the sun is up above him to the right. So we're going to make sure that his little paw shows, that it looks like a little paw. Yeah, perspective on that is not great, but and we're just going to, using harder pressure, make sure we get some shadow out in here. And it gets lighter as it moves away from him. And we can put some grass in just. So these are what I call a tapered stroke, where you have it blunt at one end and you're pulling it up and away from the paper so that it gets nice and thin at the other end. And that's a fantastic stroke to give you hair, grass, those kinds of things, fur. So just basically putting in a little bit of grass there. It's coming up behind him. And there's our little bunny. And in the reference, he's got somebody feeding him, I think. But I think we're going to have him sniffing a little flower. So maybe we can just draw in a little flower that he's looking at. So flowers are not my forte. But again, it's a sketch. I just want to give him a little point of interest where his attention is. So just something like that he's looking at. And then if you want to, we can give him some whiskers at the very last. And for that, I would use either a very sharp pencil or I usually use a 4H because it's nice and sharp and it's not overly coarse. And then they come out from behind his nose as well. So just something like that. And there's our bunny. So if you wanted to finish that up, you can take a Q-tip, something like a Q-tip, or you could use a stump, or you could use a brush. So maybe I'll show you the difference between the three. So if I use the brush down here, it's going to give me a really, really soft result. And it's also because this brush is already dirty, so it's laying down the graphite that's already on the brush, but it's going to be very, very soft results. Whereas if I use the stump, depending on how hard I press, so I'm going to try and press very, very lightly, then it will, as long as you're pressing super, super light, it will also give you a pretty soft result. You can blend that out a little bit down to his tail. And so now I want to, so the end of this stump is dirty with graphite on it. And the other end is not so dirty, but to make sure it's as clean as I can get it, I'm just taking an emery board. That's another reason I use the emery board. And I'm just cleaning the end of that stump so it has no graphite on it, or as little as possible. And what I want to do is I want to smooth out the transition from the white light cheek out rather than going in. So if I used a dirty stump, I would be laying more graphite down. So I'm trying to use a cleaner one, which didn't work too good because I guess it was still a little bit dirty. Let's see if I can. So just something like that. And that gives you your little bunny. Just in time for Easter. Exactly. Oh, thanks, Crystal. So I hope that you enjoyed this, and thank you very much for joining me. Sorry, and again, you know, if you, the more you work at this, you can add a bee in here. You can add anything you want. It is a sketch, so don't you know, don't stress over getting it perfect. For sure, that's not the idea. We just want to have some fun, learn some basic, very, very basic animal anatomy. Sketching for me is more about proportion. So it really helps me to get used to eyeballing proportion. And I can tell my proportion is a little bit out. I think his rear end here needs to be a little bit bigger. Like if your body looks like it's going to topple over because your proportions are wrong, then obviously it's, you know, so, but that's the idea with sketching. It's just very, very loose, very, very playful. And as long as it, you know, as long as my rabbit doesn't look like a camel, I'm happy. Oh, thank you, Victoria, and thank you so much for joining. So I will be back in another 2 weeks, I guess. Well, the first, and I don't know how many Saturdays there are in April, but I'm back the first and the third Saturday. So we will see you then, and thank you very much for joining. And I'm trying to build the channel, so if you wouldn't mind liking the video, it would be a big help if you liked it. Thanks again, guys, and we will see you again soon. Bye for now.